Welcome back, students of Gods, Gladiators, and as you can see, I've decided to go with either Empire or Amazons. I'm happy to see you again. That feels very disingenuous, but thank you for coming back for this lecture series. So we are starting module 2 of this course, and in this module, we are going to talk about the city of Athens. And so this is our very first lecture series. And actually, it's really our only lecture series talking about this, but this is the first in the series of lectures. And so, in this lecture, where we're going to start is with an introduction, which might seem radical, but I think you'll see my reasoning as we go through this. And this, I'm going to show many pictures of the Acropolis in Athens. While we're here, might as well just pause for a second to make sure all of our vocabulary is okay. So we're going to be talking about the city of Athens. Here, this whole so this if you see this like mountainy sort of thing right here, this whole rock essentially and everything on top of it is called the Acropolis. Acropolis means peak of the city. And so that's the Acropolis in general, which has many buildings on it. This big thing here in the center, that's our Parthenon. We're going to be talking quite a bit about the Parthenon, but there's a couple of other buildings that we will be mentioning, including the Erechtheion, which is the smaller looking building over here. And then over here on the very far left side of the screen is the entrance to the Acropolis and the Propylaea, etc. So I just wanted to make sure because I know I myself fall into the habit of referring to all of this as either the Parthenon or the Acropolis or using those two words interchangeably. So I wanted, while we're here, might as well. And then final last bonus thing before we actually move on. Below the Acropolis, you see this little outcropping of buildings. And this is actually the Theater of Dionysus, which we will be talking about quite a bit at the end of at the end of the lecture. And then when, of course, we talk about Greek theater and the two plays, I think we're going to be talking about. So, all right. So that is not that's just the beginning. That's the end of the beginning of this lecture. So when we talked about the cities of Mesopotamia, I had a an introductory slide where I talked about why I consciously chose to look at the cities of Mesopotamia kind of in a group and why in particular we were focusing on the three cities that we did. So as we talk about Athens, Athens is a city that has existed from approximately, as you can see here, 1200 BCE, so an incredibly long time ago. And it has been a city from that time until today. Like it's still obviously a functioning city today. It has this rich, incredible, amazing history. Um, but this isn't a class on just Athens. We only have one module to talk about Athens. So the purpose of this introduction is to talk about, to really narrow down what this class is talking about when we talk about Athens. That is the point of this particular introduction. So really, what we're going to be focusing on is a very short century of Athens. But before we get to that century, I wanted to give you kind of an overview of the city of Athens in like the most macro possible way, in case it's of interest to you, and in case it is useful as a way of kind of creating a scaffold of understanding. And I just realized I made this PowerPoint, so please pardon me. I made this PowerPoint like 2 weeks ago, and I'm just now able to record the lectures. So that I'm looking at all these details that seemed very funny and important to me at the time, and still are, but I've just forgotten about them. So this mug here, this set of mugs in uh oh, hang on. I'm going to talk about it at the end of the slide. I'm going to back up. Okay. So I'll tell you about these mugs in just a second. But first, as I mentioned, the city of Athens wasn't quite a city in 1200 BCE, but we do have evidence of people living there in the on the Acropolis in particular in 1200 BCE. Our book explains this very nicely. So when you have read the chapters of the book that I recommended for this module, you will see what's going on there. We'll, of course, talk about it when we talk about foundations. And I'm trying to think how we could place this in reference to the cities of Mesopotamia. So I mean, the city of Ur had kind of already come and gone by 1200 BCE. The city of Uruk had also come and gone by 1200 BCE. But so Babylon would have been an inhabited city around 1200 BCE. So by the time people start living on the Acropolis, kind of there've already been these huge cities in Mesopotamia. There have also been in Greece, and we're going to talk about this in the foundation lectures. There have been two major civilizations prior to 1200 BCE. So Athens is not the first city of Greek speakers, um, but it begins around 1200 BCE. We have evidence of people living there. Then, from 1100 approximately BCE to 800 BCE, there is this very mysterious and amazing period in Greek history that's called the Dark Ages. Now, this particular moment has been complicated by historians, and our book again talks a little bit about how there is evidence of activity during the Dark Ages. But for the most part in Greece, during this 300, 400-year period, we call it the Dark Ages because there's no kind of archaeological evidence of the growth of civilization. There are no written texts. There is not a lot of pottery. There's just no, what it looks like is people were scattered and living in kind of more rural, more individual communities and not producing the sorts of civilization and the sorts of work that lasts, which is unique for Greece because there had been these two prior civilizations, the Minoans and the Mycenaeans, that had produced civilization and great works. And so that's the Dark Ages. It's very mysterious why it happened. But then around 800 BCE, things started kind of picking back up again. We start to have evidence of pottery. We have evidence of people coming together in cities. We have evidence of growth, really. And we also have the Homeric and the Hesiodic poems, which we're going to talk about. So around 800 BCE is when we start to see Greece and the Greek-speaking cities coming out of this very dark period and starting to produce, starting to grow and to create cities and to create monuments and this sort of thing. Athens is one of those cities who, beginning in 800 BCE, we start to see the city just growing. We have archaeological evidence of growth. And we're going to talk about the sort of city, what's happening in Athens after 800 because it's very interesting and I know about it, so I like to talk about it. But then in 480 BCE, so that's approximately 320 years later, the Greek-speaking peoples were involved with these wars with Persia, the Persian Empire, so peoples coming from the east. And in 480 BCE, we had this miraculous, amazing defeat of the Persians by the Greeks. So really a very David and Goliath situation in which the Greek-speaking peoples who were very small, relatively poor, in no way as immense as the Persian Empire, defeated the Persians. This was huge. This was just like a history-changing moment. So, and that's actually where we're going to start looking at Athens, but we'll get to that in a minute. So 480 BCE, real high point for Athens. They were superstars, they were heroes, they were amazing. Then a mere 75 years later, and this is always so shocking to me, not even a century, 75 years later, the city of Athens is brought to its absolute lowest point when it is defeated by the Spartans in the Peloponnesian Wars. And so this is again something we will be talking about, but that period between 480 and 405, that's really the pivotal, that's the golden age of Athens, and that's where we're going to be hanging out. But then they were defeated in 405. After that, they never really come back. There's some moments of success, but Athens never really achieves the glory that it achieved prior to that. And then there's Alexander, and then there's Rome, and then there's, the Middle Ages and all of this stuff. But today, still today, Athens is still a standing city. If you're at all interested in like the contemporary form, the nation of the nation, the formation of the contemporary nation state of Greece, please come talk to me. I have so much information about it. It's actually really fascinating. Like Greek history in the 20th century is amazing. It's really wonderful. So if you are interested, I can give you some things to look at, some books to read, some movies to watch, some poets. They had just an amazing history. So, but yeah, the reason I wanted to point out that today, like it might be over by now. I think it ended in January. Um, the Oedipus Rex play, which was huge in Athens during the classical age of Athens, was being recreated on Broadway in New York, and that's what these mugs are from. So I just think I thought that was such a nice tie-in. Like Athens is still so with us that you can go and buy these two mugs, and it's Truth is a Mother Effer, based off of the Oedipus play. For those of you who took mythology with me, you know exactly what's going on here. If you don't, come talk to me about it. Come to my office hours. That would be really fun. But so, yeah, so that is our history of Athens in a nutshell. So our focus, as indicated, will not be all of that. That's an amazing amount of material. I don't even think one semester could cover all of that, not in a meaningful way. So what we're going to do is we're going to really just focus on that golden age of Athens between 480 BCE, when they defeated the Persians on the one hand, and 405 BCE, when they were defeated by the Spartans in the Civil War, on the other hand. So those are going to be our boundary time periods. The reason I chose these was because this is where we have just this confluence of success, amazingness in all of these spheres. It is in this time period that democracy in Athens truly flourishes and becomes the sort of democracy that we think of when we think about the birth of democracy. It's at its most democratic. At 405, they get taken over by oligarchs and tyrants, and they never quite return to that sort of radical democracy that they had beforehand. So I want to talk about that radical democracy and how it worked and what it was and what it wasn't. But also the civic identity of the Athenians, what it meant to be an Athenian was a very particular thing brought out by their plays and their comedies and their dramas. So we're going to look at that. Also, the public projects and civic space element of Athens is really at its most potent in this period. So, as we will talk about, the Acropolis was completely destroyed by the Persians. When the Persians first came to Athens in 490, they destroyed a lot of the buildings, including the original Parthenon and many other temples. So, in 480 and afterwards, the Athenians used a lot of the money that they had gotten from defeating the Persians and becoming very powerful to create all of the buildings that you can still go visit today that we think about when we think about the Acropolis, including the Parthenon. So we can talk about that in this particular moment. Art and drama, the cultural aspects of this period are just unparalleled. Like it, I'll we'll talk about it. Let me not get too excited about it, but so many brilliant, like all of the brilliant thinkers you can think of from ancient Athens lived during this particular time period. We're talking Herodotus and Thucydides, our first two historians. We're talking Aeschylus, Euripides, Sophocles, our dramatists. We're talking Aristophanes, our first okay comedian. Not so great. Socrates lived during this period. Plato was a young person during this period. Aspasia, so amazing. So that is why we're going to be talking about this time period. And so that also covers, of course, philosophy and intellectual life. And we can talk about I was going to say we can talk about if you want, if you're interested in this, and I don't talk about it enough, please remind me to do it. But the way that intellectual life was kind of conducted in Athens is so unique and so interesting because, for the most part, it happens at gyms and on couches. Like it's crazy. It's not as if they were all going to University of Athens and sitting in a classroom and having these deep philosophical discussions. Half of their intellectual life was at the gym where everyone was naked, and then the other half was like on couches in people's houses while drinking. So it's amazing. I mean, pretty great. So, but because I have chosen to focus on this one particular time period due to the constraints of this particular class, we are going to be skipping over many, many, many things that I love to talk about. I'm sure that some of you are be curious about. We are not going to be able to talk about Homer. We're not going to be able to talk about Hesiod, and we're not going to be able to talk about the Persian Wars. We are going to accept that the Persian Wars happened, but we just don't have time to get into what they are. And then we will, mention Homer and Hesiod. Hesiod's fine. I don't think anyone is like, ooh, I don't get to read Hesiod. No, no one's feeling like that. But we're not going to be able to talk that much about Homer at all. So yeah, so we just can't. It's just outside of our purview. We are going to talk about the Peloponnesian War, which is kind of what bounds us on the kind of collapse of Athens. But I want to talk about that a little bit more in the next module when we talk about Alexandria. And the reason for that is because the Peloponnesian War creates the conditions that allow for the rise of Alexander the Great, which hence leads to Alexandria. So if you're interested in the Peloponnesian Wars, we will be talking about it a little bit more in the third module. And then again, as I've mentioned, the Athens throughout history is truly, truly, I can't emphasize this enough. It's a fascinating, amazing subject. Even the recent history, like the history of the past 20 years has been amazing. But it's obviously not what this class is about. I did include this text here, Athens from ancient city to modern, what does that say? Modern ideal. It's a very good book. If you're interested, I would recommend that as kind of an overview. And if you'd ever like to talk about it, we can do that in a different way. So I do think that yes, so this is where we're going to end the introduction. I'm going to stop the lecture here so it's not too crazy, but come back for the next lecture when we will talk about the foundations of the city of Athens, and in particular, how different they are from the foundations of Mesopotamian cities. I think it's going to be really interesting. I hope that you will join me in doing that. Okay, thank you.